We're 6 games into the year, and Duke's already got 2 losses. But as head coach Jon Scheyer says, it's going to get better.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome on into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. So glad to have you here with us on Friday, November 29th, 2024. First and foremost, want to hope that all of the folks in our Locked On Blue Devils community had a very happy Thanksgiving yesterday with friends and family. I certainly did that myself. Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop where we discuss everything going on in the life of Duke athletics, and we got to break down more of the Duke basketball loss to Kansas earlier in the week, where the Duke team can improve, an opportunity to bounce back later today against Seattle. We'll dive into the final Duke football game of the regular season, and then we've also got a look around Duke athletics coming your way as well. If you have not done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free, wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review. Also available to watch each and every day on YouTube. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, and also go ahead and share the video with your friends, trying to grow this community as we get further into this basketball season for the Duke Blue Devils. Earlier in the week, as we know, Duke suffers a 75-72 defeat at the hands of number 1 Kansas. It's Duke's second loss of the season. Pretty frustrating early on in the year to already have 2 losses, but I think we knew that this was a possibility when Duke puts together a really strong and tough non-conference schedule, having already suffered a loss against Kentucky in the Champions Classic, and then now their second loss of the season comes to the hands of the Kansas Jayhawks there in Las Vegas. Looking at some of the positives to take away from this game in particular, really impressed with the fight that Duke showed throughout the game. Early on, Kansas jumps out to remember a 16-3 lead, and Duke was not deterred. They claw their way back. They're able to tie the game up at 32-32. They go into the locker room trailing by 2 points at 41-39. They've got the lead at 2 different points in the second half and just couldn't find the right way to close this one out. That's something that this team will look to improve on. Talked about it earlier in the week as well. Duke had 66 offensive possessions in the game against Kansas, shooting 50% from the floor and 42% from three-point range. Those are numbers that absolutely you'd love to see carry over in the games to come. The problem for Duke in that game against Kansas, a season-high 16 turnovers, and that's just something that you can't have. Also, if we're nitpicking a little bit, Duke needs to do a better job of knocking down their free throws. In that game in particular, Kansas was 11 of 12. Duke was 13 of 18 from the free throw line. So Duke lost the rebounding battle. When they do that, they're not in a good spot to win games like this. And if Duke is able to correct that, they'll be in a better spot, being able to create more of those possessions. I talk about shooting 50% from the floor in those 66 possessions. Duke only had 5 offensive rebounds. Kansas doubled them with 10 offensive boards and was able to create a couple of extra possessions for their basketball team themselves. We knew that Kansas was the most experienced team in the NCAA, and this was an opportunity for Duke to learn a little bit. I loved going into the broadcast. If you were watching it on ESPN, one of their opening graphics for the broadcasters to discuss was a look at 2 different preseason All-Americans and how different their journeys have been. You've got Hunter Dickinson for Kansas, who's 24 years old. He was playing his 133rd college basketball game. On the other side, another preseason All-American, Cooper Flagg, just 17 years old, 7 years younger than Dickinson, and getting set to play his 6th college basketball game. Experience won out in so many regards, although with 10 minutes left and Hunter Dickinson being ejected for kicking Malik Brown in the head. Hopefully that's something that Cooper Flagg never does. But I thought that it was important to see that experienced Kansas team go up against a younger Duke basketball team for them to take some of these experiences, learn from them, and move forward. Duke had 4 different chances in the final 2 minutes to take the lead and couldn't come up with it. I thought that was a big turning point clearly in this game when it's coming down to the end. Cooper Flagg gets a chance to redeem himself once again, has a turnover, and then on one of the final possessions, Duke has the ball in Con Knippel's hands. He drives. Kansas does a good job at doubling to him once he gets into that painted area. And once Con Knippel goes up, there are multiple bodies there. He's expecting Sion James to stay where he was at that moment, and it just results in a costly turnover that ended up costing Duke the basketball game. The largest run for Duke in this one was that 12-0 run when they were trailing 32-20 in the first half, and Duke just couldn't really put together big scoring runs offensively. If they are able to do that in the games to come, clearly they're going to be one of the better teams out there. We could see the talent that this team has on display throughout the year, but I thought that was big that, you look at this one, Duke had the lead 3 different times in the basketball game. They led 3-2, they led 42-41, and they led 67-65. With those leads, Duke only had 1 possession in the entire game with the lead, and it was when they were leading 3-2. Tyrese Proctor knocked down a three-pointer to give Duke that 3-2 lead. They go down on the other end. Kansas travels. Duke gets the basketball back. Tyrese Proctor misses an open 3, and then you go back down on the other end. Zeke Mayo for the Jayhawks knocked down a three-pointer, put Kansas back in front. That was the only lead that Duke had possession with. Again, Duke was able to take the lead 2 other times in this basketball game, but immediately when they went back on defense, Kansas scored again to take the lead back. And so for Duke, they really couldn't make Kansas be put under pressure. Duke certainly was, and they stood tall in that challenge and in that test, knowing that they were going to have to come back. Another big thing in this is the play of Con Knippel. I mentioned the turnover just a little bit ago. Our good friend on the program, Jordan Mann at JMan's Takes on X. He's on the show every single week, highlighted this after the fact. But when you look at Con Knippel's first 3 games versus Jared McCain's first 3 games, a lot of people have been thinking about the similarities there, given that they're such good shooters and what they were able to do for Duke basketball. And Jared McCain's first 3 big games, Arizona, Michigan State, and at Arkansas last year, McCain had 4.6 points per game on 20% shooting from the floor and 20% shooting from three-point range. 4.6 points, 20% from the floor, 20% from 3. Con Knippel averaging 12.6 points per game on 29% shooting, 17% from three-point range. He just had this 8-assist game against Kansas as well. Duke was able to get into good time scoring spots in that second half when Knippel had the ball in his hands. His jump shot just hasn't been falling in some of these bigger games. Outside of that, though, he's been great, and I do think that's going to improve. But you see the numbers there. Jared McCain had a better three-point percentage by 3 points in the first 3 big games on both of these guys' schedule. But it was Knippel who's averaging 12.6 points per game in those big ones compared to Jared McCain's 4.6. So it doesn't mean Con Knippel is going to turn into the player that we saw Jared McCain be all last season, and now he's a good contender for the Rookie of the Year at the NBA this season. But I think there's reason to be optimistic that Con Knippel's shot's going to start falling. We've seen it in the other games. Now let's hope that we can get a big-time shooting performance from Con next week when Duke takes on Auburn from inside Cameron Indoor Stadium. It's going to be a game against the Seattle Redhawks that we'll talk about in just a moment. I did love this lead that I was reading earlier in the week on the Duke Chronicle, kind of summarizing what Jon Scheyer had to say after the fact. And they wrote, "To be the best, you have to beat the best or lose to them and grow." And that's essentially what Jon Scheyer has been preaching to his team. And so hopefully Duke's able to take some lessons from a game like this and turn it into a positive moving forward. But again, let's get into that Seattle game, talk about what to expect for the Blue Devils when they return to the hardwood a little bit later tonight, as Locked On Blue Devils will be back here in just a moment. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We know about the NFL season in action right now, and you got to get involved with our friends over at FanDuel. We saw 3 really exciting Thanksgiving games yesterday in the NFL. Today we've got football. We've got a Black Friday game set to be played between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Las Vegas Raiders. You can go check out all the action at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything that you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Talking about Duke specifically this weekend, the Blue Devils on the hardwood are favored to knock off Seattle by 27.5 points. Duke football favored to win against Wake Forest by 4. Go see all that action and more over at FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. All right, let's keep moving. Duke getting ready to take on Seattle a little bit later tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern time on the ACC network to watch this one play out. This is the first ever meeting between these two schools, between Duke and Seattle. I don't know if people were aware of this, but earlier in the week, we had the Terry's Chocolate Showdown in Las Vegas between Kansas and Duke. And after that game was over, so many basketball fans turned their attention over to Maui. But what took place after the Duke and Kansas game in Las Vegas was a game between Seattle and Furman. So here today, Duke's going to take on Seattle at home, and then Kansas is back in Lawrence, and the Furman Paladins are over there playing Kansas. So it's a part 2 of the Terry's Chocolate Showdown, but this time this game's going to be at home for Duke as they take on Seattle for the very first time. The Redhawks are led by head coach Chris Victor. They're coming off of 3 straight 20-win seasons. They compete in the WAC, and so far this season, they've got a 2-4 record. However, all 4 of their losses have been decided by 7 points or less. This is going to be the first game of the season that Seattle goes up against a power conference competition in Duke. That's going to be a big step up for them. But against Furman earlier this week, Furman won that game 61-56 in Las Vegas. Last year, Seattle finished with a 23-14 overall record. And you take a look at what they've got on the season so far with this team. They're currently ranked 125th in KenPom, so a little bit down there in the rankings, but they're led by Matthew Alexander Moncrief, one of their players to watch, 6'8", 214. He does a little bit of everything. He's currently 7th in the entire country with 4 double-doubles, so he's a big man on the boards. He's able to score on the interior as well. Feels like the perfect matchup for somebody like Cooper Flagg. Maybe there are going to be a couple of possessions where Kamen Malawach has to body up Matthew Alexander Moncrief and be ready to go because he's going to be excited about getting the chance to play in Cameron Indoor Stadium. But I think this is the game in which Duke's able to kind of overwhelm Seattle with their talent, with their size, with everything. Again, we talk about it often, but Duke is the tallest team in America. What does that mean specifically? Duke on the season, each player averages out to 79.6 inches or approximately 6'7" for each player on this Duke basketball team. So a huge, huge team. Duke with a 4-2 record, as we've been talking about. I think Kamen Malawach is going to be a player to watch in this one, given the size advantage that he's likely to have. He's averaging 8.3 points per game, but really was not much of an offensive factor earlier in the week against Kansas. And you look at the numbers, Kamen's averaging less than 5 shots per game. I don't think it'd be a bad idea if Duke was able to drive a little bit more, dump it off to Kamen, let him get some shots around the rim. And also we've seen him knock down the three-pointer earlier this season. He knocked down a couple of long-range jump shots over the summer with South Sudan in the Olympics. It might not be a bad thing to get Kamen more involved on the offensive end of the floor. Despite the loss that Duke had against Kansas, they are still number 2 in the entire country in defensive efficiency, which is pretty awesome. And I think that Duke's defense is going to be very overwhelming for the Seattle team in particular. Duke right now ranks 12th in all of college basketball in three-pointers made per game. They're averaging 11.3, and Duke's 20th in scoring margin, plus 22.2 in each of their contests. So when Duke's winning, they're winning really big. When they're losing, it's tough, close losses. Duke's lost 2 games by a combined 8 points to Kansas and Kentucky. But shooting the outside shots, very big for the Blue Devils. Obviously, as you heard there, 12th in the entire country and three-pointers made per game. But if they're able to get the ball inside a little bit, feed Kamen Malawach, they'll be set up for some big-time success and that sort of thing. Cooper Flagg leads Duke in pretty much everything, as we talked about: points, rebounds, assists, and blocks. He had been leading in steals going into the last game, but Malik Brown took over that lead as he's now got 12 steals on the year, 2 more than Cooper Flagg himself. Also in the assist department, following his 8-assist performance against Kansas, Con Knippel has now tied Cooper Flagg for the lead in that. But still, Cooper Flagg is Mr. Do-Everything for the Duke basketball team, and I think that's going to certainly continue. And we've got to continue to talk about the season that Tyrese Proctor is having so far. He was the leading scorer for Duke in the Kansas game, going 5 of 7 from three-point range. You know, Duke had a 50% three-point shooter in Tyrese Proctor going into the Wofford game. Duke's kind of bounce back opportunity right after Kentucky, where Proctor was still shooting 50% from three, and Tyrese goes 2 for 7 from three-point range. So still a really good shooting performance, but now he's fallen under that 50% mark. Well, what does he do? He's like, okay, fine, I'll go 5 for 7 from three against Kansas, and now he's right back to an even 50% shooting on the season. And every game this year, Tyrese Proctor has made at least 2 3-pointers. He's got 20 on the year. He's shooting 20 of 40 from three-point range. I think his shot is a weapon for the Duke team. I'd also love to see him be a little bit more aggressive with the ball in his hands offensively, attack the rim, get to the free throw line. You know, that's something we talked about so much last year on Locked On Blue Devils, and I think that could do wonders for his game in particular. So really fired up to see how Proctor can continue his strong play here. Just 7 shots against Kansas, and all of them were 3-pointers. I'd love to see him get the ball in his hands a little bit more, be aggressive once he's there, and take off. And then let's see if his fellow guard and Caleb Foster can keep improving. It's been a slow start to the year for Foster now in his sophomore year. Remember, he missed the last 9 games of his freshman year with injury. He's shooting 44% from the floor and 33% from three-point range. He had the worst plus-minus at -13 of anybody on the Duke team in particular. Bottom line, it's Seattle. The Seattle Redhawks, according to the ESPN Basketball Power Index and analytics, have a 1.3% chance to win this one. So you're saying there's a chance. Yes, but there's no world in which Duke basketball should lose this one. A good opportunity to get back right. And then a really big test is coming next Wednesday against the Auburn Tigers, who so far look like one of the absolute best teams in the entire country, having just won the Maui Invitational. So it's going to be a big test. Really excited to see how Duke bounces back a little bit later tonight. We're set for one more timeout here on the program today. And then when we come back, we're going to get the opportunity to talk a little bit about Duke football, closing out their regular season, and we'll have a further look around Duke athletics. Locked On Blue Devils will continue here in just a moment. This episode of Locked On Blue Devils is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time, the absolute best place to go and find your tickets. Game Time's got a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets within the app. That's my absolute favorite thing about it. Who wants to waste time when you can use Game Time Picks? The all-in pricing feature is awesome, where it shows you the total up front. There's no surprise fees at checkout. You know exactly what you're going to be paying for. It's the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. I love the seat views as well from within the app. You can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. It gives you the opportunity to know exactly what to expect when you head to the game or to the concert. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Once again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's Game Time. It's a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. All right, Duke football getting set for their final game of the regular season. The Blue Devils have an opportunity to finish the year with a 9-3 record on the season, which is just outstanding. Again, since 1941, Duke football has only had 9 wins in the regular season twice, in 2013 and in 2014. And the Blue Devils have only ever had one 10-win season in the history of their program, going over 100 years, and that was in that 2013 season when Duke finished the year with a 10-4 record. It's unbelievable what Manny Diaz has been able to do in year one. He has exceeded every single expectation and then some with what he's been able to do. And so the last step on this regular season challenge for the Blue Devils is coming up tomorrow against Wake Forest. For the Blue Devils, they'll be on the road in Winston-Salem. This game's going to kick off at noon Eastern time. You can watch it on the ACC network as Duke is favored by 4 points. Wake Forest, a 4-7 record on the year. They're 2-5 in ACC play. Their wins this season are over Stanford and NC State. Both of their ACC wins are actually on the road. So now they're going to look to win their first home ACC game. However, Wake Forest is not going to be in a position to go to a bowl game once the season comes to a close. Last year, Duke won this game against the Demon Deacons by a score of 24-21, and Duke leads the all-time series 59 wins, 40 losses, and 2 ties. It's the 102nd meeting between Duke and Wake Forest. Excited to see this game play out. You'll recognize a familiar signal caller at quarterback for Wake Forest if you're big-time college football fans. Their quarterback this season has been Hank Bachmeier, who is in his 6th season of college football. He was at Boise State. Last year, he transferred to Louisiana Tech. And then following that season, he said he's going to use his last year of eligibility. He's got the COVID year left to go. And so he's playing at Wake Forest this season. On the year, he's got 15 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, a 61% completion percentage. And last week against Miami, Wake Forest lost 42-14, and they weren't able to get the ball going through the air as Bachmeier finished just 8 of 14 for 86 passing yards. That's it. They could not throw the ball much at all. We'll have to see if they're able to run the ball against this Duke football defensive front. Wake Forest is in the bottom half of the ACC in total defense. They're not great against the pass, which is a good thing for Duke as they've really been improving in passing situations over the last few weeks. Massive game last week for Eli Pankel, who finishes with 5 catches, over 180 yards receiving. He's got 3 touchdowns in the game last week. We know about Jordan Moore, who's on his way to an all-ACC caliber season there at wideout. Deep threats, jump ball players. I think they're going to be big-time factors. Then maybe this is an opportunity for a big-time game in the passing game for somebody like Samir Hagans, who against Miami was his best season or best game so far this year, had 9 catches for 139 yards. He's really shifty, and this could be a sort of a preview of what 2025 could look like for Duke through the year. More opportunities for Malik Murphy to rep practice throws and whatnot with Samir Hagans because they will both be back, barring any decision to jump into the transfer portal for Duke next year. Eli Pankel and Jordan Moore have run out of college eligibility. And Wake Forest, they're bad against the pass. So this is even more proof that maybe this Duke football team can have the opportunity to throw the ball through the air. Having said that, really important to avoid interceptions. While Duke did defeat Virginia Tech last week, Malik Murphy had 3 picks, and he's had a couple of interceptions throughout the season, and you want to make sure that you're not giving a team like Wake Forest more opportunities to score and to win and to do good things themselves. So I think it's really important to make sure that you avoid those costly interceptions if you're Malik Murphy, and so maybe that's also relying on the run game a little bit. Duke just had 64 rushing yards against Virginia Tech last week. And for the Blue Devils, it's good to keep the clock moving. And if you run the football, you're able to do that. I'm feeling good about Duke's chances going into this one. An opportunity again to get their 9th regular season win. And what a year that would be for this Duke football team in Manny Diaz first season. So with that being said, also a look around Duke athletics this weekend. Tomorrow, we've got a big game against Virginia Tech. But in soccer, Duke women's soccer is now in the quarterfinals of the NCAA tournament. They get to play a home NCAA tournament game before advancing to the College Cup. Should they win, the College Cup is the Final Four, so to speak. In soccer, it'd be the 5th time that Duke was going to the College Cup should they win. 1992, 2011, 2015, and 2017, the other years that Duke's been able to do that. So best of luck to the Duke women's soccer team. And last week, unfortunately, we saw the end of the season for Duke men's soccer. They were upset. Duke, the number 10 overall seed, and men's soccer, they lost 1-0 at home in the first round against San Diego. So the Blue Devils finish with an 11-5-4 record to the season. Again, Duke women's soccer, the number 1 overall seed in the tournament. They're playing 12th seeded Virginia Tech in the quarterfinals coming up tomorrow. So best of luck to the Blue Devils there. That's going to do it for our show here today. Thank you so much for your support. As always, please go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to our podcast feed, leave us a 5-star rating and written review. Best of luck to Duke basketball a little bit later tonight, taking on Seattle. It's going to be a really fun and awesome weekend. That'll do it again for our show. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you on Monday. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.